Ever imagine building your dream company in India? Launching a killer startup, disrupting an entire industry. It's exciting stuff until, well, you hit a wall, a legal logjam, and often it's the National Company Law Tribunal, or the NCLT as it's better known. And that's our deep dive for today. We're taking a closer look at the NCLT, the body that handles everything from company insolvencies to those massive mergers you read about. And let me tell you, the articles and expert opinions we've gathered, well, they paint a fascinating picture. One article actually calls the NCLT a maze, and honestly, that's a pretty spot-on description. I mean, they've got this whole e-filing system, which should make things easier, right? But here's the catch. You often still need physical copies. It's like they invented online forms just so you could print them out.
It does feel a bit ironic, doesn't it? This whole thing about needing physical copies, it kind of highlights a bigger issue, the digital gap. It's a real barrier to accessing justice, especially for some entrepreneurs and businesses, especially outside the major cities. They don't always have the resources to navigate these, well, let's be honest, outdated processes.
It's mind-boggling, and speaking of access, good luck if you're trying to navigate the NCLT from outside Delhi. Seriously, imagine flying across the country just to submit paperwork.
Yeah, it's a big hurdle.
Yeah.
For smaller businesses, especially startups, this geographic limitation is a real problem, stifles innovation. And ultimately, it hurts economic growth in other parts of India.
And just when you thought it couldn't get any more complicated, there's another layer to this maze, the registry staff. From what I'm reading, they're known for their meticulous, let's say, attention to detail. Which on the surface you might think, okay, that's a good thing, right? But one lawyer we spoke to shared a story about how difficult it was to get urgent matters listed without a judge having to step in. And these kinds of bottlenecks, well, they lead to huge delays. And in the business world, time is
Money.
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those delays, they have a real economic cost. Imagine you're an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
You've got this incredible idea. You're ready to change the world, but then you're stuck waiting for months, sometimes years, just for your case to be heard. It's a nightmare.
It's heartbreaking. So we've got this e-filing system that's not really e-filing. We've got geographic restrictions and a system that seems to thrive on procedural delays. What kind of impact is this having on businesses, especially on the ground level?
It's a big impact. And there's one statistic from our research that really drives this home. The average resolution time. For insolvency cases under the IBC, that's the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, it's ballooned to 677 days.
677 days.
Almost 2 years.
Wow, that's longer than some prison sentences.
It is. And during those 2 years, businesses are left hanging. Assets lose value. Investors get scared off. It throws a wrench into the entire process, creates this cloud of uncertainty that makes it incredibly hard for businesses to operate effectively.
So far, it's pretty clear we've been talking about the system itself. But there's another piece of the puzzle, and it's a big one, the human element.
Right, because behind every case, every file, there are people making decisions, for better or worse.
Exactly. And some of the articles we've been looking at, well, they raise some serious questions about the judges and the tribunal members themselves, their training, their expertise, even their work ethic is being questioned.
Yeah, it's a sensitive topic, but we can't ignore it if we want to really dissect why the NCLT isn't working the way it should be.
Absolutely. And get this, one article even mentions technical members, the experts, being found sleeping during hearings. I mean, come on.
Well, it does make you wonder about the disconnect between, understanding the law and actually understanding how business works in the real world. Because a lot of these judicial members, they come from lower courts, places where they may not have had to deal with the intricacies of, say, a billion-dollar merger.
It's kind of like asking a general doctor to perform open heart surgery.
Exactly. You need specialized knowledge.
Right.
And then there are the technical members. Often they're bureaucrats, which means they've got a strong administrative background. But do they have the business acumen to grasp what's really going on in these complex financial cases?
So it's not just about having a bunch of judges, it's about having the right judges with the right skills and experience.
That's it, exactly. We need people who don't just know the law. They need to know business. They need to be able to look at a balance sheet, understand the market, and make informed decisions that could impact, well, entire industries, not just one company.
Okay, so we've really dug into the problems here, but let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about solutions. What needs to happen to fix this?
Well, one of the most common suggestions is pretty straightforward. More benches, more judges
Makes sense.
across the country.
Yeah.
This could definitely help with that backlog of cases, and it would certainly make the NCLT more accessible to folks who don't live in major cities.
That seems logical, but like we said, it's not just about quantity, right? It's about having the right people for the job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just adding more judges isn't going to magically fix the expertise gap or make the system more efficient. And that's why you see a lot of experts calling for specialized benches.
Okay, so dedicated benches for, like, say, IBC cases.
Exactly.
Kind of like how we have specialized courts for family law or criminal law.
That's the idea. Let judges develop real expertise in a specific area of law. Streamline the process.
Okay, so less of a one-size-fits-all approach and more of a tailored system. Makes sense.
Right. And another thing, alongside those specialized benches, there's this growing idea that the NCLT needs to, well, prioritize resolutions instead of just admitting every single claim that comes across their desk.
So focusing on actual outcomes rather than just the number of cases they're processing.
Yes, shifting that mindset from simply pushing paper to actually solving problems.
Okay, so that's dealing with the efficiency side of things, but what about the expertise issue? How do we make sure the judges are really equipped to handle the complexities of the business world?
Training is key. And not just, those one-time workshops. I'm talking about ongoing deep dive training programs that keep judges up to date with the business world.
So like continuing education, but for judges. I like it.
Exactly. Some experts even suggest bringing in people from the private sector, experienced lawyers, industry professionals. Let them share their on-the-ground insights.
That's interesting. Getting those real-world perspectives could be incredibly valuable.
It's all about bridging that gap between the legal world and the business world, creating a system that actually understands how things work in the real world.
It's like bringing the real world into the courtroom, which makes a lot of sense. But even with the best judges and the best training, you still have to factor in, the human element. And high-profile cases, those can really put the system to the test. Speaking of which, we can't talk about the NCLT without mentioning a case that's been all over the news, the Byju's saga.
Right, the ed tech company.
Oh, exactly.
It's a fascinating case, really, and kind of a cautionary tale about how these systemic problems, these things we've been discussing, they can play out on a massive scale.
So for those who haven't followed the story, Byju's found themselves in a bit of trouble. Massive debts, facing potential insolvency.
Right, and then they managed to strike a deal with the BCCI, no less, the Board of Control for Cricket in India.
Which, for our international listeners, that's a big deal. Big organization.
Huge. And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, because they chose to settle with the BCCI, a major creditor, while still owing a ton of money to other creditors. And even the Supreme Court raised questions about that.
It did raise eyebrows.
I remember reading about it and thinking, why prioritize one creditor over all the others, especially when you're in such deep financial trouble?
Yeah.
It seemed, I don't know.
A bit odd.
Yeah.
Well, it brings up some uncomfortable questions about influence, doesn't it? About whether certain creditors are given preferential treatment.
And the need for more transparency, right? If the decision-making process is murky, how can anyone, especially other creditors, feel like they're being treated fairly?
Exactly. Transparency and accountability, those are non-negotiables for any judicial body, but especially for one that has such a huge impact on the economy. The Byju's case, however it ultimately shakes out, it really underscores that need for a system that not only delivers justice, but is also seen as delivering justice.
So where do we go from here? We've uncovered the challenges, the potential fixes, even looked at a real-world example of how these issues are playing out. What are our listeners supposed to take away from all of this?
I think the main takeaway is this. The NCLT, it has its flaws, but it's a vital part of the Indian economy. It's the referee, making sure everyone plays by the rules, resolving disputes. What we need now is a real push for reform from the judiciary, from the government, from the business community. We all need to work together to make the system more efficient, more transparent, and ultimately more trustworthy.
It's like we've identified all the bugs. Now it's time to debug the system.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. And that's where our listeners come in. You have a voice. You can advocate for a better system.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought for everyone listening. If you could give the Indian government one piece of advice, one change to make the NCLT more efficient, what would it be? Overhaul the judge appointment process. Mandatory training programs. Maybe find a way to speed up those resolutions. Whatever it is, let us know. Share your ideas on social media with the hashtag #FixTheNCLT. Because a better NCLT, well, it benefits everyone. Businesses, investors, the economy, it matters.